working with a pretty big amount of data or data they need to parse to, I don't know, do something with big amount of data. Have you been thinking in terms of implementing the multi-threading in PHP?
No.
Kind of library?
PHP will never have threading. Because if you think of the world PHP lives on front-end web servers, right? You never want a front-end web server doing any sort of data crunching. If you need to do data crunching, you need to batch it off to a worker somewhere, usually on a separate farm of servers. So, at Etsy, for example, I use Gearman. So I have a farm of 30 machines that just have workers sitting there waiting for jobs. One of the things we batch off is resizing images. So someone uploads a photo of a thing they want to sell. We need to resize it, we need to do various things to this photo. We actually pick up the colors, because we have an API, we can give me all the green items, right? In order for us to find the green items, we have to analyze all the photos and index the colors that are in these photos, the primary colors. So that's a really heavy operation. That's the kind of thing you're talking about, data crunching, basically, right?
Yes.
The last thing we want to do is have our front-end web servers doing any sort of data crunching. We want to return a result within 400 milliseconds. If we have to crunch data offline, it has to be out of band, asynchronous, somewhere else. And sometimes we need the result on that request, but we don't actually, it looks to the user like it comes back on that request, but it's not. We actually do a little JavaScript thing, right? So we do an AJAX thing. So there's a little AJAX process bar that says, okay, we're still processing your image, but this AJAX call, these are individual requests to the web server that just checks to see if the back-end process is done yet, right? That's living on a separate server. Because PHP is a web-focused language, we do not want to build features that encourage people to do this on their web servers, because it's just not the right way of doing it. There are times when you want to do things in parallel. Not data crunching things, but things like I had talked about earlier, asynchronous SQL queries, or asynchronous DNS resolving. So you might want to fire off 5 DNS queries in parallel. But those types of things, threading is the wrong solution for those kinds, because that's not a data crunching thing. You don't need processing on the thread, you simply need events. So that becomes an event-driven thing. And we have all the event support we need in PHP. You can send off a whole bunch of requests, and you can sit and poll and have all those things happening in parallel. We also have a lib event extension that you can do that with. We do have a pthread extension, so you can actually launch pthreads from PHP, but that's targeted at command line PHP and daemons and things that run like long-running scripts. And that capability is there already. There's a pthread extension that you can install, but it's not going to be core PHP because it just doesn't make sense. It only makes sense for the fringes. For the main target of PHP, it doesn't make sense. And it also complicated things a hell of a lot in the code itself. And I want to keep things as simple and fast as I can in the code. Yes?
Should we use persistent connections to PHP, or is it better to make multiple products?
Persistent connections to PHP in terms of like a game server or a meeting? Okay. Typically, you wouldn't want to have you wouldn't want to tie up a server to run a long time like that. I mean, you can, but typically you want to have, like I was talking about, fast requests or return things, keeping a connection open. I mean, you can use WebSockets, and then you can, usually what people end up doing, in order to maintain a WebSocket connection, they end up putting Varnish or something, they put a proxy in front of things, right? And then that will maintain the connection. And then there might be a PHP backend, but that would be a more traditional request response type thing, as opposed to keeping the request open. That being said, I have written stuff that does keep the request open for a long time. And every time something new happens, I just push more stuff out through, stand it out, and it works okay, you can do it. It doesn't scale that well though, because at PHP, so if you're using Apache, for example, you're tying up one Apache process or if you're using Nginx with PHP FPM, again, you're tying up one PHP process to a connection, right? And for the most part, that connection, that process isn't doing anything. Mostly you're waiting for something to happen. So you're sitting there tying up one process, and most of the time that process is just waiting for something to happen. And when something happens, you want to be able to send something to them right away. But the problem is, once you have 5,000 concurrent users, it's really hard to have 5,000 concurrent PHP/Apache processes running. You need a massive machine for that, or you need lots of machines. You're better off from a scalability perspective to simply proxy those, to have something much lighter. Apache's traffic server, for example, can maintain connections, Varnish can maintain connections, and have something that keeps the connections, but then once there's something to do, you do it, right? Then you make the request to PHP, and then you don't have to have all these processes sitting there and active, heavy-duty processes. You want something lighter to maintain connections. So the real answer to your question is no, it's not a good idea, because a PHP process is too heavyweight to just have it sitting around waiting for things to happen. If you're going to run PHP, it should be doing things, and then once it's done, it should be ready for the next guy who needs it. Yes?
First of all, thank you very much for your work on PHP. It really makes work better. And my question will be about test-driven development. What can you say about implementation of test-driven development in PHP? For example, like it was done in Ruby, the developers of Ruby attached the test framework to the current version, for example, Ruby 2.0.0. What can you say about implementation of TDD and PHP, and what can you say about
Well, we have
this idea in general?
We have I mean, we're not really TDD, but we do have a ton of tests, right? So we have something like 16,000 tests right now. So if you compile PHP and type make tests, go have a coffee, because they're going to be running for quite a while. Testing has always been central to PHP. Every time we add a new thing, we add a new test. But it's not traditional TDD, because we're moving a little bit too fast, and we're not as structured as many other software development projects. But that's all I can really say about it, is that we have tons of tests. Our tests catch regression problems all the time. We do a lot of static analysis, which isn't really TDD, but so we do static analysis runs using various systems that will automatically find things. So our testing is not necessarily perfect, but we do, for example, if you go to gcov.php.net, you can see our code coverage from all our tests. So you can go into any piece of PHP, and you can see how much of this particular extension is covered by tests. So we spent a lot of time working on our test framework and working on making sure our test coverage is good. We run test fests, where basically we get a room full of people together and say, look, here's the code coverage for this particular part of PHP. It's only at 40%. By the end of tonight, we want it to be at 80%. Right? And then people just smash away at it and say, okay, I just rolled a test to test this piece, and I rolled a test to test this piece, right? To get our code coverage up. So I think in terms of projects, we're pretty good on the testing side of things, especially in involving the community in running these test tests, where we make it a bit of a party to write more tests and get better tests and better code coverage. But it's not traditional TDD. We're not that formal with it. We try to make it more fun, because TDD sucks. It's boring. There's nothing interesting about it. I'm sorry. But, so making it fun, making it a little game, making it a competition, bringing lots of beer and pizza into the equation, and we have a little bit of fun with something that really is pretty tedious. Yeah?
Thank you very much for sharing slides.
No problem.
Your slide. And my question is, what is your favorite hosting solution or hosting platform for big enterprise projects? I mean, solution like Elastic or some database, some web server, some content management system. Thank you.
It really depends on your needs.
I understand.
Right?
I understand.
saying like one fits all. Some providers provide certain features. Personally, I'm kind of old, obviously. I mean, I've been around a long time, long before there even were hosting providers out there. And I tend to host my own servers. I'm the wrong guy to ask, because I don't trust anybody else to compile my things, to manage my things, right? I didn't even trust somebody else to write my language for me. I wrote my own. So, in terms of people to ask, I'm really the wrong guy. People always ask me which framework is my favorite. I wouldn't use anybody else's framework, because I didn't write it. And I know that's not a good thing, because I rewrite everything myself, and that's not very efficient. But that's just kind of the way I am. But I do find the various hosting providers out there interesting. Jelastic has been doing some really cool things with their managed servers. They have really good PHP support, and it's getting better. It's one of the reasons I'm here, is I'm helping them with how they're supporting PHP. And when you create a PHP container, you can create a PHP 5.5 container now in Jelastic, which is really cool. So you can pick 5.3, 5.4, 5.5. I think the latest version you can only pick 5.4 and 5.5 actually, which is good. And it's really easy to deploy to it. So, and other hosting providers as well has made that really easy. But you're talking about enterprise and really large ones, I think, is your question, for really large providers, or really large projects. I'm not sure any of them can take all of it. What you usually end up doing is putting some of the platform on a provider, do some EC2, do some Jelastic, but there are other pieces that are just too customized and too specialized for somebody else to manage. So you usually end up with some of your own servers, and you end up with a bit of a combination. Like at Etsy, where we use some EC2, we use some Amazon services for things that were just sort of simple image stores, for example. We use CDNs for these things. So in the real world, what you end up doing is picking out smaller pieces, some of the simpler pieces, and say, okay, let's just outsource this piece, because this is just about lots of machines, no real thought is needed here. This is just infrastructure. And then we keep 20 machines in the data center somewhere for some of the more complicated things where our real business logic, where our unique features are sort of there that we need full control over. We can't wait for somebody external to get around to installing this piece of software that we need or anything like that. So I think that's still happening in the real world like that. But these providers like Jelastic, they're improving really, really fast, and they're getting much, much better at spreading out and getting into more of the edges and the fringe things there. So maybe pretty soon you can build a huge enterprise system and stick it all on Jelastic. I think that'd be cool. I don't think we're quite there yet, though. But for smaller stuff, definitely. Small, mid-sized companies, put the entire thing on that and it'll work fine.
Thank you.
No. Yes?
What would you call as a best practice to fight against MySQL injections?
Well, not just MySQL, any SQL injection, right? But prepare, execute, right? Prepare your queries and make sure that doesn't avoid everything, because there are parts of a query that if you just put user data directly into a query somewhere, other than prepared variables, then you can still have problems. Like the limit piece, you might put in something saying where the user can control whether they have 20 or 40 results on the page, and if you just stick that directly into the user variable, you can have problems there too. So it's input filtering, right?
Sanitize each query.
You have to sanitize the input and make sure you use prepare execute for the values. And there's nothing special there. It's input sanitation and prepare execute. Never construct your queries correctly and send them off. Always make sure you do a prepare and execute, and then for the most part you're safe.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm just thinking in terms of make some handy things native in PHP, and I just want to ask about aspects, ALP. It could be very handy in development.
Yeah, we have looked a little bit at AOP stuff in PHP, but it's never really taken off. There's nobody within the PHP project that's all that interested in it. So it has to be an outside contributor that came in and said, okay, here's how we should do AOP stuff in PHP. For us, none of us have needed it. PHP is a very selfish project in that sense, that developers tend to work on the things they need, right? We don't sit down and look at, hey, what does everybody else need? I don't really care what everybody else needs. Actually, I build PHP for me and for things that I feel that I need to solve the problems that I see. So AOP is kind of a different way of attacking things, and I won't say we won't have AOP in PHP ever, but right now there's nothing really going on that side because nobody has stepped forward to come up with it. We've had some requests that say, hey, really cool if you could do some AOP stuff, but without a patch and without a solid RFC, this is how we add features to PHP. People write out a really detailed RFC, and this is the feature, these are all the tests, this is how it should be implemented, here's the patch, right? Short of that, things don't happen in PHP, not just because people wish things would happen, people actually have to write the code. So if you're interested.
Well, the good live example of implementing this, that PHP unit tests are actively using the ALP to inject the assertions, etc., to the classes. So that could be just a simple example of this.
Right, but you can do that already, right? Dependency injection, you can do that without anything changing in PHP.
Yes.
I mean, you have all the functionality you need for that part of AOP, so it's there. Go for it. Not much else to say on that. In 10 years? That's like asking what's the internet going to look like in 10 years? We have no idea. And PHP kind of follows the internet. Right? So things that we need to build web applications today and tomorrow we have in PHP. What's the web going to look like in 10 years? Well, that's kind of what PHP is going to look like in terms of, is it all HTML5 WebSockets? If it's all HTML5 WebSockets in 10 years, there's going to be a lot more support for that in PHP. If it's all, I don't know, I can't even imagine what might happen. I mean, try going back 10 years and looking at the state of the web 10 years ago, and things were quite different. But PHP tends to keep up. So more realistically, I think we'll have a JIT in PHP in 10 years. Hopefully we'll have it before 10 years actually. But in 10 years, I think the core of PHP will be a much better JIT. And I think we'll continue to see really drastic performance increases over the next 10 years in PHP because of that. Other than that, I think various features that become more mainstream along the way. We keep track of ECMAScript, the standard, the JavaScript standard, keep track of some of the things they're doing there and seeing if some of these things apply to PHP. So as that moves ahead. But on the other hand, things move pretty slowly in PHP as well. I mean, people are still running PHP 5.1 and 5.2 released 8+ years ago, right? So people are still kind of on PHP from 8 years ago. So for some people, PHP in 10 years will be PHP 5.5. I just showed you that that's what it's going to look like in 10 years for those people because they haven't upgraded. Yeah.
I think everybody heard about Facebook, hip hop, and contact the KPHP. Also, contact says that our web art is too heavy for them. What do you think about this?
Well, that I just mentioned that I think we'll have a JIT in PHP at some point. It might be the hip hop JIT, maybe in 2-3 years. It's nowhere near ready to run arbitrary code, and it's not very portable to different platforms and things. So they still have a lot of work to do on that. There are other companies working on JITs as well. So I kind of hope in maybe in a year, year and a half, 2 years, we'll have some kind of JIT off, where we look at all the JITs and try to figure out, okay, which is the fastest, which is the most complete, and then we pick one of them. And that becomes the new core of PHP, or the new engine kind of PHP. Maybe, we'll see. A lot of things can happen in a couple of years, but right now, none of these things are anywhere near ready to sort of step in and become PHP, just because it's really targeted at a really small slice, and it doesn't come anywhere near getting the breadth of PHP that we currently have, and that's really important. So until they can handle more code, run more of the code that's out there, nothing's really going to happen. But I like the direction, I like the speed improvements that we see in these things. Have I tired you up?
What about running PHP inside JVM?
Running PHP inside of JVM. There are projects that do that. They tend to have issues. It's the same thing that we see in some of the JITs, right? It's really easy to get 80% language coverage in something like that. It's really hard to get the last 20, and the last 5 is almost impossible. So you get something that's almost PHP, but not really. And so I don't think it'll ever happen. I think the way forward is a JIT specifically written for PHP, and not trying to shove PHP into the JVM. I don't think that's going to happen. And there have been projects trying to do that now for years and years and years, and none of them have been successful, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they can run some code, but no one's using them. So they don't run enough code. And it's not, the complexity is not worth the slight performance increase. Yeah.
Thank you again for your speech, and just sort of a personal question. What's your preference in regards of code writing software or what are you personally using?
Like my environment?
Yeah.
Well, I have a Linux laptop. I use Vim, GCC, Outline, GD. Pretty much it. I mean, it's not complicated. I don't use any IDEs, if that's what you mean. I don't use any sort of graphical tools. If I have to use a mouse for something, there's something wrong. Okay. I think we've run out of questions.
Last call for anyone.
Okay.
What do you recommend to use? Mod PHP with Apache or Nginx with PHP APM?
If you're starting from scratch and you don't have any legacy code that needs Apache, I would suggest going to Nginx with PHP APM. If you have code that relies on features that only Apache, like mod rewrite is the standard thing. If you have a lot of mod rewrite rules, it's a pain in the ass translating all these things too. You can. I mean, you can do the same thing in Nginx, but it's not the same syntax. You have to convert each rule over, and that just becomes tedious. And in the end, on a complicated PHP request, the amount of time that's spent at the web server level is trivial. So about 0.02% of your time might be spent in the web server layer, and the rest is all spent in PHP. So even if Nginx was 100 times faster than Apache, it wouldn't matter, right? Because so little time is spent there to make 0.02% 100 times faster, it's still less than 0.02% performance increase on it, right? So it's irrelevant. So essentially, it doesn't matter which web server you use because it tends to disappear. Now, if you're only serving up static files, images, things like that, then yes, the web server becomes much more important because it's doing all the work. But for a PHP that's talking to databases and things, performance-wise, it doesn't matter. It comes down to management things, like which one would you prefer to manage? So you ask your operations team, which one are you familiar with? Are you more familiar with Apache or Nginx? If they're really familiar with Apache, don't give them something new that might confuse them. stay with the patch, right? So that's really where you make a decision. From a performance perspective, it doesn't really come to.
And one more question. What would you recommend for a multilingual website? I mean, any framework or practice?
For a multilingual website,
Yeah.
most of the frameworks have support for multiple languages.
Are there any best ones?
I'm the wrong guy to ask. I don't use frameworks. I don't like the frameworks. It's code somebody else has written that I can't figure out. So, no, I really don't know which ones. Maybe, I mean, there are sites out there that go through all the features of the frameworks and compare them and look at some of those and see. I know lots of people use Symfony, lots of people use the Semi framework and others, right? So, but honestly, there are people in this room that know better than I do about some of these things. So,
Thanks for PHP then.
you're very welcome. All right, I think we're done. Thank you very much.